I wish to speak to you today about the tragedy of Europe. This noble continent, comprising the fairest and the most cultivated regions of the earth, enjoying a temperate and equable climate, is the home of all the great parent races of the Western world. It is the fountain of Christian faith and Christian ethics. It is the origin of most of the culture, the arts, philosophy, and science, both of ancient and modern times. If Europe were once united in the sharing of its common inheritance, there would be no limit to the happiness, to the prosperity and the glory which its 300 or 400 million people would enjoy. Yet it is from Europe that have sprung that series of frightful nationalistic quarrels originated by the Teutonic nations in their rise to power, which we have seen in this 20th century and even in our own lifetime wreck the peace and mar the prospects of all mankind. And what is the plight to which Europe has been reduced? Some of the smaller states have indeed made a good recovery, but over wide areas, a vast quivering mass of tormented, hungry, careworn, and bewildered human beings gape at the ruins of their cities and their homes and scan the dark horizons for the approach of some new peril, tyranny, or terror. Among the victors there is a babel of voices. Among the vanquished, the sullen silence of despair. That is all that Europeans, grouped in so many ancient states and nations, that is all that the Germanic races have got by tearing each other to pieces and spreading havoc far and wide. Indeed, but for the fact that the great republic across the Atlantic Ocean has at length realized that the ruin or enslavement of Europe would involve their own fate as well, and has stretched out hands of succor and of guidance, but for that the Dark Ages would have returned in all their cruelty and squalor. Gentlemen, they may still return. Yet all the while there is a remedy which, if it were generally and spontaneously adopted by the great majority of people in many lands, would, as if by a miracle, transform the whole scene, and would in a few years make all Europe, or the greater part of it, as free and as happy as Switzerland is today. What is this sovereign remedy? It is to recreate the European family, or as much of it as we can, and to provide it with a structure under which it can dwell in peace, in safety, and in freedom. We must build a kind of United States of Europe. In this way only will hundreds of millions of toilers be able to regain the simple joys and hopes which make life worth living. The process is simple. All that is needed is the resolve of hundreds of millions of men and women to do right instead of wrong, and to gain as their reward blessing instead of cursing? And why should there not be an European group which could give a sense of enlarged patriotism and common citizenship to the distracted peoples of this turbulent and mighty continent? And why should it not take its rightful place with other great groupings and help to shape the onward destinies of man? In order that this should be accomplished, there must be an act of faith in which millions of families speaking many languages must consciously take part. We all know that the 2 world wars through which we have passed arose out of the vain passion of a newly united Germany to play the dominating part in the world. In this last struggle, crimes and massacres have been committed for which there is no parallel since the invasion of the Mongols in the 14th century, and no equal at any time in human history. The guilty must be punished. Germany must be deprived of the power to rearm and make another aggressive war. But when all this has been done, as it will be done, as it is being done, then there must be an end to retribution. There must be what Mr. Gladstone many years ago called a blessed act of oblivion. We must all turn our backs upon the horrors of the past. We must look to the future. We cannot afford to drag forward across the years that are to come the hatreds and revenges which have sprung from the injuries of the past. If Europe is to be saved from infinite misery, and indeed from final doom, there must be this act of faith in the European family, and this act of oblivion against all the crimes and follies of the past. Can the free peoples of Europe rise to the height of these resolves of the soul and of the instincts of the spirit of man? If they can, the wrongs and injuries which have been inflicted will have been washed away on all sides by the miseries which have been endured. Is there any need for further floods of agony? Is the only lesson of history to be that mankind is unteachable? Let there be justice, mercy, and freedom. The peoples have only to will it, and all will achieve their heart's desire. The structure of the United States of Europe, if well and truly built, will be such as to make the material strength of a single state less important. Small nations will count as much as large ones and gain their honor by their contribution to the common cause. The ancient states and principalities of Germany, freely joined together for mutual convenience in a federal system, might take their individual places among the United States of Europe. I shall not try to make a detailed program for hundreds of millions of people who want to be happy and free, prosperous and safe, who wish to enjoy the 4 freedoms of which the great President Roosevelt spoke, and live in accordance with the principles embodied in the Atlantic Charter. If this is their wish, if this is the wish of the Europeans in so many lands, they have only to say so. and means can certainly be found, and machinery erected to carry that wish to full fruition. But I must give you a warning. Time may be short. At present, there is a breathing space. The cannons have ceased firing. The fighting has stopped, but the dangers have not stopped. If we are to form the United States of Europe, or whatever name it may take, we must begin now. We must recreate the European family in a regional structure, called, it may be, the United States of Europe. And the first practical step would be to form a Council of Europe. If at first all the states of Europe are not willing or able to join the Union, we must nevertheless proceed to assemble and combine those who will and those who can.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this is the 70th anniversary year of Churchill's speech on the cause of a united Europe at Zurich on the 19th of September 1946. Of course, the speech was a speech of great prescience and great vision, and it was also a speech of the most profound analysis. And I will, if I may, unlike most of my other honourable friends and other gentlemen in this House, reflect at a little more distance from Britain's experience of the European Union, and in particular my party's long-standing commitment to the European cause. Madam Deputy Speaker, reflect for a moment on the sight of what Europe must have looked like, the tragedy of what Europe must have looked like in 1945. It's worth the House reflecting on it. It's only in the winking of an eye in terms of time and history. It was only 71 years ago that the Germans surrendered to the Allies and signed the Instrument of Surrender. It was only 70 years ago that the Russians drew down the Iron Curtain on a broken and suffering Eastern Europe. And behind that line, in the wicked grip of a ruthless regime, lay all the great capitals and states of Eastern Europe: Warsaw, Prague, Berlin, Bucharest, Sofia. Most of the rest of continental Europe lay shattered and broken after 6 years of war, for the second time in 25 years. There remained a vast mass of bewildered human beings who gazed forlornly at the wreckage of their homes, their nations, their lives, their families, their possessions, everything that they loved. But from that awful scene of desolation, of sadness, of ruin and despair, little over 70 years ago, something truly remarkable has been achieved, which has brought freedom, security and prosperity way beyond the dreams that anyone alive at that time would ever have contemplated. For not only have the sovereign states of Europe risen phoenix-like from the ashes of 2 world wars, but they have created of their own free will a European Union of 28 members, comprising the biggest and most powerful single market in the world of 500 million people, in which we travel with our fellow Europeans in prosperity, in peace, and in a constantly expanding era of cooperation, prosperity, security, safety, and freedom. And when the Cold War ended and the Berlin Wall came down on that glorious cold 9th of November 1989, the Warsaw Pact collapsed into dust without ever a shot being fired. Most of the Eastern European countries joined the European Union, and most of them also joined NATO. Indeed, there are only 6 countries who are members of the European Union who are not members of NATO. And why did they join? Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Europe and the NATO that they joined were and are prosperous, secure and free. And they wanted, just as soon as they could, to find shelter in those institutions who had benefited from a period of peace, stability, freedom and security unprecedented in 1,000 years of European history, and which would protect them from a still predatory Russia. There is no argument, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the European Union was absolutely central to these developments, and it is a very great credit to our country that we should have played such a leading role in seeing all this through.